Hello, I'm Tara Ruckman.
And I'm Stephanie Howe, and we are Control the Chaos EDU. Are you burnout? Are you feeling frustrated or overwhelmed?
Or maybe it's the opposite, and you're a go-getter and want to level up. Then it's time to dive in with real talk and solution-focused conversations. Hello, and welcome to today's Control the Chaos conversation. So, today we're going to be talking about bringing joy to the classroom. So, what's the why behind bringing joy to the classroom, right? We automatically think of, we're going to school and we're doing academics, and what did you learn in science, and what did you learn in social studies? But what about joy? I mean, do we ever ask kids about what was fun in school today? How were you happy in school today? I mean, some of us do, but when we really think about the why behind bringing joy to the classroom, I'm just going to give a personal reflection here for a minute. So this just recently happened to me, and so it's been on my mind. Last week on Monday, I think if you are an avid listener, you probably know that I'm fighting stage 4 cancer. Last week, I had some surgery on Monday. I had a procedure done on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, I had treatment. So overall, I mean, each day, I was in the hospital for hours and hours and hours, right? So really, that can be hard mentally. And you can struggle with your mental well being at that point when you're in the hospital that many days, that many hours over and over, and you're not carrying on with your daily life and your body's having all that trauma. Um, but by day 3 is when you feel like you would be really worn out. So I'm in the treatment room, and I realized as my husband started making jokes and I put some music on and we started joking around with the nurse, and all of us are laughing. The three of us, my husband, myself, and I, are just laughing over all of the things that were happening in the treatment room. Like, she was going to unplug me from the machine, and I was dancing and just having a good time. That's really hard to do, but in that moment, I realized how much laughter can help bring you out of that negative state of mind, because laughter creates joy and happiness. So I was listening to the person next to us, and it was like, complain, and this is hard. And she was blaming the nurses and the doctors for hiding her results. And it was like one thing after another. And of course, my heart went out to that person because cancer is difficult, right? But as I'm sitting there and I'm laughing with my husband and the nurse, I realized how my mental state was. And I feel like sometimes we forget about that with our kiddos in school, how our mental state and joy and laughter can open up our mind and help us to learn. So there is a study by Martin Seligway, and it's the theory of well-being. And he talks about how a pleasant life, an engaged life, and a meaningful life opens yourself up to learning. So there's 5 parts of the PERMA model, it's called, and it's positive emotion, relationships, accomplishment, engagement, and meaning. So as we're going to get into those today. Steph, do you have any? I know we've talked about joy in the classroom and what it kind of, my personal experience that was outside of the classroom, but really all about joy as well, what it does in your life. Can you share with us something that you have seen? Because I know part of what you do is you go in and create that engagement, which with tech, you have so many opportunities to increase that engagement and bring joy to the classroom. So I know that you have a lot of examples of this.
Yeah, and I think too, teaching is stressful. So you have to just remind yourself to laugh. Because even if something is completely crazy, you just have to kind of find the humor in it, I think, at times. But yeah, I get the fun job of coming in, and I feel like I'm the grandparent when it comes to education. Like I get to come in and I get to have fun with the kids and teach them all these new skills. And just kind of play games sometimes is like what I'll model with teachers. And then I get to leave. Because there's certain teachers where they sign up for monthly coaching cycles with me. And so we'll co-plan, I'll come in, and then whenever the kids start to see me, it's usually by October, November, because it will be like the second or third time that they see my face. Um, they they get so excited, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna have fun today because you're here." And I'm like, "You don't know that. Like, you don't know what we're even doing." But when they do see me come into their classroom and they know I'm gonna be in there for the whole day. And what's so exciting too, I think, when you can bring joy and gamification or game-based learning into your classroom, you build up this hype with your first class. So I was in a classroom the other day, and the first class we did city guesser. And so the kid, I mean, it was a hard game. The kids had to get a mile away from where we were just by using this guy that had his camera on and he's walking the streets of different cities. And so this guy, he's walking all these different streets, and the kids, I mean, it's hard. They have to first guess the state. What state are we in? Then they have to guess what city we're in, and then they have to get down to the actual street. And then I challenge them with like vocab words, like you have to use east, west, north, south, northwest, whatever, because they're all like, go over there. And I'm like, I don't know what over there is. We have a lot of fun with it, but they're really learning in just a different way. Usually I try to hide the learning with the kids so that way they're having fun while doing it. And what happened in that class is they went off, I don't know when, but they told the next class that was coming in what we were doing. And then the second class was like, "Are we doing that activity?" And the teacher was like, "Yeah." And it's just funny how you can build up hype through your day just from doing something really exciting with one class, and they'll share it with the other classes. So then those kids are coming in excited to hear what it's going to look like and what their day is going to be filled with. But we were just having a lot of fun trying to guess. And with City Guesser, there is no search bar. And I'm like trying to tell the kids because they did not understand that I couldn't just type in the street number and it would just pop up on the map. Like I actually had to scroll and try to find this street. And we were in like Alaska. And I was like, I've never been to Alaska. I don't know where anything is in Alaska. And so I'm like, okay, where is it like by? And the kids had to use all these vocabulary words to try to help me find this on the map. So it was a lot of problem solving, but also just a lot of fun conversations to find the location. And we got a mile away and we got confetti. And so it was just fun.
Everybody has to have joy over confetti, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, and it's not just about like the fun and the laughter, honestly. It is research based that joy actually creates this excuse me, a component of belonging and brings happiness, and it builds student relationships that are of course critical, and it opens the mind to allow for a greater comprehension. So it's not just about like, oh, we're going to go have fun, but it actually is research based that joy creates an additional and increased amount of learning, versus when you're overwhelmed, or you have negative energy or the work is stressful. So it reduces the stress not only in the students and the teachers, but like as a classroom whole, right? It reduces that amount of feelings of being overwhelmed. It creates energy in your teaching. It empowers students. So there's so many positive benefits of bringing joy to the room, we're going in and having fun, right? So all of those things combined, if you go in, have all of these great activities that Steph has. And I love that you described yourself as grandma. Like, that's perfect. That's awesome. But it also, like, it increases their attention. Like, there's so many positive benefits. So let's start getting into, okay, how do we bring joy to the classroom? And looking at this PERMA model. So the first topic is for the P, is positive emotions. So, how do we bring some of those positive emotions in that PERMA model? So, doing things like having fun Fridays, but maybe changing your theme because you want that structure and routine, so that you can still keep those rules and expectations going on, but then adding a level of unpredictability. And Steph, why do we want to add a level of unpredictability?
Because it adds excitement and curiosity.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that excitement and curiosity then increases the learning. So, defying expectation, and I'm not sure who said this, but the quote is defying expectation is a powerful strategy of joy. So, you have this normal structure and routine, and then you flip it on them and add some kind of new component that surprises them. One of the things we did last year is adding a roadblock, right? So we're doing a normal activity and then all of a sudden you add this roadblock, like now you have to do it non-verbally, or you have to in the middle of it you have to stand up and do 30 jumping jacks, or you have to write with your left hand. So those little tiny things that you could switch up. I saw a teacher that had all of their kids in the elementary school. This is a teacher in Pickerington. I saw this on Twitter that she was having her kids do their normal routine at the end of the day, but they were walking backwards in the classroom, which just gives that like fun little like twist in the structure that creates that level of unpredictability and increases the learning and defies that expectation in that powerful strategy of joy.
Yeah, which then brings us to the next letter. So looking at E, engagement. So again, talking about those fun Fridays, talking about those choice boards, that gamification piece that you can add for students. So that's kind of like your activities and thinking about what can you do to get your students to engage in the learning. And I think sometimes it's just thinking about an activity and just kind of saying, okay, what can I do with this activity to maybe add some discussion or add some group work or think pair shares or get the students to have fun with it. A lot of times, I mean, I'm working on like a spreadsheet of a ton of games just to find my library of everything that I kind of have. And as I'm looking through some of those, I was like, this can really be adapted for any subject. We just have to add the task cards or the questions that are within the curriculum, and you have this fun added bonus into that activity.
And the PERMA model, the way it defines engagement, which is so true. I never really use this word, but it's like having being engaged in that moment completely and entering in a flow, right? Like you create this flow of work or this flow of whatever it is, the outcome you're doing, whether it's a project or a game or a fun Friday, but you're creating this flow of work. Instead of that stop and go and we're going to work on this for a minute and then we're going to switch this, but you create this flow which then focuses on things that truly students enjoy and care about once they have this flow going. So that is a different definition of engagement, but that is that part of that PERMA model for the theory of well being. So creating a flow with engagement.
I do like the flow word there, where you're able to just kind of add some activities. And again, they should flow together. You don't wanna just kind of mismatch different things, like, make sure they do kind of flow together and they're meeting your standards and your lesson objectives.
So, as we're going into topic 3, talking about flow, we're flowing from 2 to 3. We're talking about relationships. I mean, you never enter a meeting in education where you don't talk about relationships at some point, right? Like that is the key to almost everything in education. That is one of those core principles of education, or I'm going to call it a core principle. But everybody needs somebody when you're talking about the theory of well being. So, how can we enhance that? Is we're building those strong relationships with all the people that are around us. So, we do that with team building, commuting, um, storytelling. I think one of the things we do in our school, we have some pod talks where we have in the elementary school where we have multiple classes that come into the pods all at once. And we do a community build within the pod. I know they do some different things in the middle school as well, with that community building amongst a whole team. I think, Steph, you had on here make mistakes. Tell us what you mean by making mistakes. How does that build relationships?
Yeah, I think just being able to feel comfortable to make mistakes in a classroom is really important. And I think as a teacher, we have to think, how are we creating that classroom culture? Is it okay? Is it a safe space for students to speak up? Is it a safe space for students to just try and fail forward and make those mistakes where you're able to give them feedback and they can take it and keep growing? Because there's sometimes I walk in a classroom and I'll see kids and they're not getting started on their assignment. And so now I've kind of started to think, are they not getting started on their assignment because they're afraid to fail? And is that the classroom environment that we might have created or the peers in the classroom have created? And how do we stop that from happening? How do we get kids where it's okay to just fail? And I know for me, a personal kind of story there is I do have dyslexia. And so when I'm dealing with different things and when I was in school, I remember like if it was a writing activity, I don't wanna write. I don't wanna get my ideas out. And then now, today, Tara and I are writing a book, and I'm just like, "Get it out there, who cares if it's not spelled right or the grammar's wrong?" Because Tara will go back and fix it. So, it all depends, though, on who you're working with and what environment you're in, right? Like, there's some people when I'm sitting with them and we have an open Google Doc, I'm afraid to type something because I'm like, I could spell that word wrong and then they could say something and judge me for that. But then when you're with other people, it's like, just get it out there. We'll fix it later, or we'll go back and we'll edit it. But it's so true with our kids as well. Like, how are you creating your classroom space where maybe it is that safe space for them to fail forward? And are you creating that space where it is okay to just get started and that it won't be the perfect finished product, but they're just getting their ideas out there?
We want them to prefer, um, we want them not to avoid trying, right? Like I would rather them be okay with making a mistake than be okay with not trying. So if we have created an environment where they don't feel comfortable with mistakes, then our motivation to try is going to be a lot less, right? We want to increase their motivation to attempt it and make mistakes versus not try at all. And if students have this environment that you've created and you've allowed them to make mistakes and they feel comfortable with mistakes, then the increase of motivation to try is going to happen within your classroom, right?
Mm,
I have had teachers in the behavior piece that have said, I have a student that they just don't want to try to do anything. They just don't want to. Like they sit, they have their head down, maybe somewhere along the line, and maybe not. But maybe somewhere along the line, the reason why they don't try is because they've become afraid to make mistakes. So we have to try to undo that in our environments if that's happening, and make sure that they know it's okay to make mistakes. You're not going to be in trouble. I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm going to help you through it. Your peer's going to help you through it. Nobody's going to laugh at you. Like all of those feelings that you get when you maybe are have an area of struggle. So increasing that motivation to try. So because you know it's a safe place to make mistakes. So super important. I love that part about making mistakes.
Yeah, and it's just something you have to think about when you are teaching because what kind of environment are you creating? And think about yourself. Where do you feel like you can make the most mistakes and fail forward compared to environments where you can't? And how does that impact you? Because I know it impacts me for sure. And I just have to remember that imposter syndrome like, no, I have great ideas. I might just struggle with getting them out in writing, but I still need to just get it out there, and fail forward with talking it through.
Yeah, yeah.
Which then brings us to our next topic, which is the M, and that stands for meaning. So, when you have those different projects or you're creating that positive energy or that joy in your classroom, what is the meaning? And sometimes it's going to that why. Why are we doing this activity? Why is this activity so important? Or how is this going to impact others? So this is where you can bring in that service learning or those projects in. So one great way is those PBL projects where students might be solving some type of problem that impacts different humans. We love using FedEx Day. So that is like one of our favorite projects. I feel like we need to start creating more of those just for students to do throughout the year. But again, it's focused on solving a problem. And then students are using the design thinking process to go through each step to see how do I solve this problem? They're not just coming up with a solution. They're really thinking about who does this impact and why does it impact them? And thinking about that other version or that other side of the equation and how they can make those improvements with that conversation and with that product.
And it doesn't always have to be like a full-blown PBL day, right? But if we're connecting it to human components, and we're creating that empathy and providing meaning. So, just a small example, like instead of calculating square footage of a rectangle, right?
Mhm.
Maybe now we're calculating square footage of a garden that is going to be used to donate food sources to the local food pantry, right? So, like small things, it doesn't have to be this giant project every time, but how can we fit those human components into some of our everyday learning to provide meaning to students and get them to connect and create a sense of joy? I don't know for anybody else, but when there's meaning and value, and I feel like I'm helping someone or doing something positive, it motivates me to continue to learn and keep going. Like I mean, we're coaches, right? That's what we do. We try to help teachers, we try to help students. So having students connect to that piece, maybe it's a high schooler that's going to tutor elementaries, maybe it's a fourth grader that's going to support a kindergartner at the end of the day because they're struggling with their routine. So how can we, promote that meaning within our classroom, because that meaning then helps to create the joy. So that's perm. Now we have the PERM, right? So the positive emotions, engagement, relationships, and meaning. And our last one to support bringing joy to the classroom is accomplishment. So give us some ways that accomplishment can be brought into the classroom and what we mean by that in the PERMA model.
Yeah, so when we're talking about that accomplishment piece, it can be done a lot of different ways. And I think a lot of times we have to celebrate the students and celebrate the joys and all of that kind of stuff. And this is the level where you're able to empower your students and start to see ownership with them taking over. So when you're able to give them different tasks, now it's looking at what they did and celebrating that worst idea, that best idea. When I was at Google, they had a fail bell. And so anytime you either made a mistake or you pivoted from your project or pivoted from an idea, you had to ring the bell. And we all stopped whenever we heard the bell and we celebrated. So maybe it's celebrating the failures to build that culture in your classroom. Or maybe it is just celebrating students as they complete their project when they're doing something. But again, everybody kind of needs to feel like, yes, I have accomplished this. It's a win for me. You can also do it in your game-based learning where you have some students that complete a task or there's some winning or some competition. And it's just making students feel like I did this and I did it really well.
Yeah, I mean, everyone needs to win, right? That's what accomplishment is. That's the definition in the PERMA model is that everybody needs to win sometimes. So, especially this, when we see it goes back to positive reinforcement, right? Our kids that struggle, we need to try to get them some type of success to feel that positivity. But it's not just for our kids that are struggling, it's for all people. If you are accomplishing something that increases your endorphins because you're happy, creates that sense of well-being, that you feel like I did this and I did this well, or I did it, I failed, I did it again, and I succeeded this time. And how awesome is that when we have created an environment already? We talked about where we can make mistakes. They come back, they learn it again after they've made the mistakes, and now they've gotten to that place of accomplishment where yes, they have done it. They have overcome the barriers and somebody in the classroom is winning. I love the idea about the bell. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy because it would go off like so many times towards the end of our projects. People
But
um,
a power empowering students, you know, and creating that student ownership, I think, you have done that in with your roadmaps. When they've worked through that roadmap and they've just gotten through, had those little pieces of check-ins, but they've worked through that roadmap all the time. I would love to have a bell at the end of a roadmap.
yeah, that could be
That
fun. That's a good idea.
that would be fun. That's like your finish line, right? Finish the roadmap.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be exciting. So anyway, accomplishment, empowering students, student ownership, um, and just creating that win for students. How can we celebrate those wins?
Yeah, and so we've gone through the PERMA model. So now you know all of the different letters, and your call to action is to think about one of those parts. So think about, is it the positive emotions, engagement, relationships, the meaning or accomplishment? And when you think about those parts, which one are you going to focus on for your classroom this week? Okay. So again, sometimes it kind of flows together, I think, but really focus on one area that you are going to improve on and really think about how you can bring joy into your classroom. And I think too, we cannot always control our students' emotions, and that sometimes can be a roadblock. But I do know when I'm surrounded by positive people, even though if I had a really bad morning or bad day, your brain starts to just kind of switch. And you are able to then be surrounded by those people. And we really have to use this research that we know about the brain and help increase our learning by making it joyful. Because there are some classrooms where it's not joyful. The teacher's super stressed out, and that's feeding onto your students. And when you are in a stressful environment, you're not always able to learn the best that you can. And so again, think about that PERMA model. What area are you going to focus on? Implement it, try it, see if there's a little change in your classroom. And if so, come back to it and try something else the next week. So until next time, make sure you control the chaos. Thanks for listening to Control the Chaos EDU. Check out the description for show notes.
We look forward to connecting with you on social media. Subscribe to the weekly podcast so you never miss an episode. Control the chaos. Until next time.